Good evening. I'm Jeff Spence from the Alumni Relations Office at Thomas Jefferson University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program. Tonight, we'll explore the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic and other current events and trends are having on the fashion industry and where its future may lie. To lead our program, it's my pleasure to welcome Farai Simoyi. Farai joined Jefferson this year as the program director and teaching assistant professor of fashion design programs, continuing her journey as both a fashion designer and executive who has been honored in numerous publications and with speaking engagements around the world. She also champions global artisans and designers through her company, The Narrative. We're thrilled to have her as part of the Jefferson community, and even more so to have her here with us tonight. Farai, welcome and take it away.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting, especially in fashion and in so many different industries because so much is happening. But like Jeff said, my name is Farai Simoyi. I'm the program director at Thomas Jefferson University. And I've had the privilege of working in an industry from 15 years ago to now and just sort of seeing the changes. So I kind of want to walk you through the evolution of fashion, what I like to call the COVIDlution of fashion. All right, here we go. So the COVIDlution of fashion. What does fashion mean to evolve in a COVID world? And here's the thing. Fashion is not new to things that happen in the industry in terms of politics, economics, wars, and plagues. If we kind of take it a step back and let's talk about history, World War I was one of the first times that fashion was really influenced in terms of, you had the men being drafted to war and the women's uniform was born. If you look at Coco Chanel's collections back then, you would notice that a lot of her collections were inspired by menswear. And that's really a time when Black became timeless and became very classic. And then we move on to World War II, where rationing of materials was introduced. And that sort of created a new simplicity. You saw hemlines start to shorten, decorative elements started to disappear. And Japanese silk at that time, because of Pearl Harbor, was actually banned. And that's when rayon was born. But let's talk about the Spanish flu in 1918. This flu is eerily similar to what is happening in our pandemic. The Spanish flu, it infected 500 million people, which at that time was a third of the world's population. And Stern & Stern Textiles at that time decided, we're focused in textiles, let's put out a veil. And this is when they started producing the first safety veil and put it out on the market made out of Shetland mesh. And then another company called Adler's started to make gauze anti-influenza masks that were actually available for purchase for 5 cents a piece. And the interesting thing is at that time, sort of like now, masks were encouraged by some health officials. And in some places that were heavily urban or dense, like New York City, masks were actually required. And at that time, you could actually get a $5 fine for non-compliance. And with that, flu veils, they surged, the sales of them surged. And to keep up with demand, because they had a lot of store closures back then, similar to what's happening now, a lot of the staff took to making masks. And since the Spanish flu, it started around the spring. By the time the fall hit, you saw that there was the rise of sales in blankets, comforters, and winter underwear, which today is considered our athleisure. And of course, because people weren't going out in public, the sales of ready-to-wear and suits dropped significantly. So now we're here at COVID-19. COVID-19 has crushed a 2.5 trillion global industry, and we're still in the thick of it. Unemployment is on the rise and the consumer is just not interested in buying. So how did we get here? I want to kind of talk about the month that really changed the world for us. And this is January 2020, exactly a year from today. You had January 2nd, 41 patients in Wuhan had been infected by the virus. And by the time news came over here, by January 30th, we had Mike Flanagan, who's the CEO of apparel industry consultancy, who said, you know what? I really think we're overreacting. It's not a big deal. Let's just let this blow over. And by Easter, we should all be back to normal. Then the very next day, on January 31st, the denim giant that we all know as Levi's closes half of its stores in China. And that's when things really started to get real. And we move on to February, and this is the month that started the trickle down effect. So you had Capri Holdings, who owns Michael Kors and Jimmy Choo. They estimated a loss of approximately $100 million. Then you have Tapestry, who owns Coach and Kate Spade. They come out and they say they're going to estimate a loss of $250 million. Then middle of the month in February, you have Under Armour, who's starting to realize that their supply chain is being interrupted in terms of deliveries, in terms of product development. So they think quick and try to find a way to restructure their 2020 plan. And then the very next day, PVH with Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger stores, they all shut down. So here's where it begins. When manufacturing shuts down, it completely destroys and disbands our whole entire fashion ecosystem. So at this point in China, we have millions of garment workers losing their jobs with less than a month's salary severance. And for a lot of human rights activists and activists, in the sustainable fashion world, it was really a disruption because you had companies like H&M, Primark, Nike, who are $1 million companies who were not helping out the garment workers in China. So that became a topic of conversation. And that's when a lot of call out culture, cancel culture kind of came out, because I think people were really upset that these companies were not helping these garment workers. And then at the same time, you had thousands of global brands lose orders. If there's no manufacturing, there's no inventory, and there's nothing to sell. And then that leads us to distribution. So here in the US, our retail stores start to shut down from left and right. And to survive, retailers must shift online and offer digital solutions to shop. And look, every company out there, they have an online platform, but an online platform before COVID was always seen as a shiny object and more so as an addition to their brick and mortar stores. But now retailers have to think quick. How can we, restructure our websites to make sure that they're easy to navigate? And then at the same time, the consumer is forced to use social commerce, curbside pickup, and apps to access products. And at this time, there begins a bit of a disconnect, right? So you have the baby boomers and Gen X's that are used to going into the stores and shopping and sort of having that customer, company relations and just experiencing it all. And then you have the millennials and the Gen Zers that are used to using their apps and downloading programs and shopping on social commerce. So now the retailer has to sort of find a middle ground so that they're still, getting the baby boomers and Gen X's to shop, as well as the millennials and the Gen Zers. So now we start looking at sales. And I really love this data, this graph that I found from Amazon. And it talks about the heavy decline in apparel. So we have apparel, footwear, and accessories all down almost 50%. And the thing that we don't realize is apparel is actually a very discretionary purchase. It's not something that is a necessity. I think when we shop, we're shopping because we have an event or we're going on vacation, or it's just more of a want as opposed to a need. And if you look at the graph, you'll see that basics and sleepwear was only down 27%. And that sort of tells you people are at home, so they want to wear things that are more comfortable. And of course, globally with stay-at-home orders, canceled trips and events, there's a less emphasis on dress. So where do we go from here? It's a moment for our industry to reset, to rethink, re-envision, and rewire all together. And I really loved what Imran Ahmed from Business of Fashion said. He said, beyond crisis management and contingency planning, we must shift towards reimagining our industry altogether. We need to look at the global economy. We need to look at consumer behavior and figure out how to rewire a system that is no longer working. And what does this mean? It means there are major opportunities right now for the next gen of creators, of designers, of influencers. And how is this going to happen? So at this point, we're sort of in it right now. And there's something that's happening called the Darwinian shakeout. And what that means is that this crisis will shake out the weak, it will embolden the strong, and accelerate the decline of companies that were already struggling before the pandemic. As I said, in the fashion industry, inventory is currency. And as of now, with the data, it says 80% of fashion companies would be in distress after more than 2 months of store closures. And you would think that, the industry's business models would build themselves to last crises and, economical wars or plagues. But the way our industry has been set up, it really doesn't allow that. And remember at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how Mike Flanagan said, this is only going to last us a couple months till Easter because he knows the data behind it. And now we're already a year in and still having those effects. So as you can see, the entire 2020, we had companies file bankruptcy left and right. Lord & Taylor, Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, J. Crew, Men's Warehouse, Lane Bryant, the list goes on. And the interesting thing is these are $1 million companies, and I'm sure we all have an item from these companies in our closets. And it's just amazing to see how these big giants have also all just sort of came crumbling down. So who are the brands that are going to win? Let's take a look at this. This is slow fashion. These are the brands that are really going to take charge if they focus and they do it right. So slow fashion brands are the ones that are focused on product life cycle. They're focused on made to order and really only producing what's in demand. So they're not worried about having to deal with leftover or excess inventory. And then they also do smaller production runs and focus on purposeful and intentional design. And I really love this brand, Kenneth Eze from Nigeria. I love what they do. They're all about slow fashion. As you can see with the colors and the prints, they're really intentional about what they do, where everything is placed. And then on top of it, they partner with local artisans in Nigeria to produce handcrafted items. And these are some amazing brands also on the market that are doing phenomenal. So we have Maison Clio in France. And then to the far right, we have Olivia Rose the Label. So what these two brands have done is created a new business model. I won't say new, but they've revamped a business model in fashion. And what they do is something called e-shop drops. So instead of creating inventory and just letting it sit and see if it sells, they only create enough product to last them a week. So I believe Olivia the Rose, it's every Sunday, and Maison Clio, it's every Friday. And they have a countdown to when that, specific capsule or collection will be dropped. And they've been doing phenomenal. They've been selling out every week since last year because the customer is excited. They're allowing customers to sort of come on this journey with them. And I thought that was really interesting. And I can sort of see more companies going in this direction. And then you have Chelsea Bravo, who's a New York brand and who's someone that is very meticulous about what she does. And she does everything handmade with a small team in her studio in New York City. Other brands that are going to win are sustainable fashion brands. I mean, we've been having this conversation about sustainability in all sectors of industry. So these are brands that are focused on environmental and social impact. So when we talk about environmental, there are brands that are using recycled, repurposed, or dead stock fabric, brands that are interested in organic or raw natural materials, and also brands that are interested in reducing their carbon footprint and producing locally. And not to say it's producing in your town, in your city, but just producing closer to home. I mean, we're already seeing the supply chain issues with producing in China, but had these brands produced locally, they wouldn't have faced a lot of these problems. And of course, brands that are focused on low to zero waste consumption. And that could be from pattern making, that could be fabric waste. Also, packaging is a big deal. And social impact is so important in terms of human rights, in terms of race and fashion. Those are really big talking points. So even brands that are just championing these activists and this activism in this space. And I love Doen, California. They're a brand that does everything sustainably. They use natural fabrics. And part of their social impact is to support and promote gender equality. Other brands that are just killing the game, you have Kuyana, who's a US-based brand, but they do everything handcrafted in Europe and South America. And they work with artisans that have been practicing craftsmanship for, in their family and generations, sort of passed down from years and years. And then you have Tradlands, who's in California, where they only work with recycled remnants. So let's say you have Gucci, and they put out a whole collection and they have leftover fabrics. This company, Tradlands, would then use a jobber and buy this fabric and then recreate new products. And then I also love Studio 189 from Ghana. They work with artisan communities. So a lot of their fabrics, it's traditional African batik. It's all handmade, hand dyed, and they're just championing women's rights, activism rights, gender equality. So I really love the work that they're doing. Other brands that are going to succeed in the COVID world are brands that are focused on technology. Fashion and tech is a really big thing right now. So we're talking virtual and augmented reality. So when stores really start to get back to normal, can people sort of go in and there's a touch screen and maybe it scans your entire body and then sort of gives you a checklist of what things in the store you can try on and that will fit you. There's also programs out there for designers like Clothes 3D, Stitch 3D, or Browseware, which allow you to create 3D collections. And then you also have artificial intelligence. And what that does is, you can create data that can help you boost sales. It can help you with trend forecasting and real-time inventory tracking, which is a big thing. And then you have mobile commerce. Because of COVID, mobile commerce has been the fastest growing sector in e-com. So even when you have a website and you have an e-com store, is finding a way to convert that into a mobile phone so that it's still easy to navigate. And then blockchain. Blockchain is a new thing, and I know it can be confusing sometimes, but trying to figure out how we can get blockchain, which is really ultimately data collecting, to track the journey of a garment. So you would literally track it from thread, from fiber, all the way to production, all the way to being shipped here, to being in the store, to the point where the customer buys it and they walk out with that product out of the front door. So that's sort of how we can incorporate blockchain. And two companies that are doing phenomenal. So this is TrueFit. It's a personalization platform that allows users to find an adequate fit with brands and new styles on the market. So you kind of like type in information like brands that you love, what sizes you wear in these brands, and then it sort of goes through a system and then shoots out, for 7 jeans, for 7 for all mankind, you would fit this size and it would fit you this way in the waist. It would be an excellent fit in the hips, in the thigh, inseam, and so on. Another tech company called Intelligence Node is great because it allows you to track trends in real time. Advanced forecasting is a really big deal for designers because you have to be a designer, especially if you want to grow your brand. It's important to know what trends are happening and what trends are not, because it allows you to create the correct inventory that can be sold in that next season. So that's a really great tech company that's out there right now. Other companies that are doing phenomenal, which sort of is an addition to technology, is innovative brands. So these are brands that are focused in smart clothing and responsive sportswear, and also novel fabrics. So there's a biofabrication company called Modern Meadow, and they're actually growing lab-grown leather. Apparently from their research, they've figured out that vegan leather is actually not as sustainable as people think it is. So, they're sort of testing the product right now. What will lab-grown leather look like? And there's also right now, there's like pineapple leather, mushroom leather. So these are innovative companies that are trying to create new things with materials that sort of already exist in the market. And then, of course, cloud computing. Everyone is like, where's the cloud? Where does it exist? But trust me, it exists. It's somewhere. And cloud computing software is a great way for effective communicating. So when you're communicating with your factories overseas, you're able to do this in real time. So companies that are focused in that are really going to take a lead. And I really loved this brand. It's called Nadi X. So these are yoga pants that have built-in sensors. So when you're doing your yoga poses, it vibrates to tell you, whether or not you're doing the right moves. And it connects to Bluetooth with your iPhone. So after your iPhone, you can kind of track your movement. It tells you, what positions or poses you did correctly and what you can work on. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of smart clothing and responsive sportswear. Some other brands in innovation. So we have Project Hazel, which is, as of now, considered the world's smartest mask. They're still in beta phase, so they're still putting everything together. And what it does is you get the mask and it actually comes with a charging station. So it has a UV sterilizer, and then it has this voice amp technology. So, when you have your mask on and you're trying to talk and your sound is all muffled, where this is built in so that your voice is clear when you speak through it. And then it also has rechargeable ventilators. So when you have it on, you're constantly being fed with clean air. And I thought that was such an interesting thing in terms of, right now we're in the space of fabric masks. Those are really big right now. But this should be interesting to see how it does when it hits the market. And then you have the Snapchat spectacles, which are interesting. So this is actually their second model. You put the glasses on and it has two cameras on each side. You can do photography, you can do videography, and then it also has a microphone in it. So you can use it for social media, or maybe if we were doing this in person, I could probably get a cool pair I could wear and actually be videotaping the audience's response as I'm putting a presentation together. So I thought that was really interesting. And then you have the Levi's commuter jacquard, which was a partnership with Google. So this jacket connects to your phone via Bluetooth. And, it can give you directions. You can play your music on it. It can talk to you. Like, it has a lot of different features. And I think once you download the app on your phone, you can pick and choose what kind of features you want on it. So I thought that was a really great way for a company like Levi's, who's been in the industry for so long, that has now created a partnership with a giant tech company like Google. So, what are the top three things our industry has learned from COVID-19? So, excess inventory can really make or break your company because inventory is currency. So, brands need to find digital ways and focusing on working with digital innovative companies to limit and manage excess inventory because inventory is profits. And then also, like we talked about earlier, leveraging forecasting technology so that they're not just creating just to create, but they're creating things that are actually happening in the market. And forecasting is a big thing because it not only just looks at what are people wearing, they're looking at the weather, they're looking at the economy, how much money can people spend on items. They're also looking at, especially when everything happened with China, there were specific fabrics that we weren't able to get. You probably saw like cotton prices went up, so it's also using forecasting, not just for the looks, but for the business model. Also developing resilient supply chains. And you know what? Companies in the fashion industry need to be really flexible in terms of their supply chains and also building a model that puts the supplier first, creating partnerships with your supplier. So if you're sort of going into it with your factory overseas and saying, look, let's split the production costs and then split the profit costs, then you're both in it together and you can work with each other. And also another big thing with supply chain is I always say, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And what I mean by that is, I had a partner, a really good friend of mine, and he does all of his production in China, from his shoes, undergarments, apparel, everything. So when COVID hit, he was stuck. The retailers were canceling his orders. He couldn't get anything shipped. So to this day, he still has inventory sitting in a warehouse in China. But had he maybe sourced his buttons from Turkey, done some production here in Philadelphia, ordered some cotton from South Africa, then he's allowing himself to be more flexible so that if part of your supply chain, let's say in China, sort of falls to the way, you still have other options in different areas. And then, of course, last but not least, is to prioritize sustainability. I mean, this is inevitable. This is the direction of where our fashion industry is going. We have to be more thoughtful about what we do. We need to think about the earth, how our industry impacts the earth, because I keep hearing they're saying that the fashion industry was one of the largest polluting industries out there. I beg to differ, but we have that reputation. So we really need to focus on prioritizing sustainability. And you know what? I say all of this to say the future looks bright. There's so many opportunities out there, especially for our young creatives and our young designers and the students that we're working with right here at Thomas Jefferson University. And I loved what this brand is doing. So this is a Scandinavian brand called Carlings, and they came out with the first digital collection, fully digital. So you can go on their website, you can buy a product, It's usually between $11 and $33. And then once you buy it, they'll reach out to you and you send them like your body measurements. You can either send them an avatar or you can send them a picture of yourself. And then they will impose the garment that you bought on you. And then they'll email you the file. So once you have that file, you can print it out, you can use it for whatever you wish. But the great thing about what they're doing is that they're also giving those profits to a company called WaterAid. So there's so many ways that you can build your company. And there was actually another company called Fabric Ant. And last year, they sold a digital dress for $9,500. And when I say digital, like I just want everyone to understand that it's not a physical product, it's a digital product. So it just goes to show that people are excited, people are interested, they want to push the envelope and just go for it. So if we keep our eyes on the stars and just keep going, I really think there's a lot of opportunities for all of us. So thank you so much for having me here, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Farai. And don't be surprised if you see me soon digitally in that Carling's blue coat. But everyone, if you can feel free to share your questions using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, just try moving your mouse and it should appear. We did receive a few questions in advance as well. Farai, to kick things off in our questions, we had a few folks who really wanted to talk a little bit about the job market. Specifically, what your thoughts are on starting a business at this time and how to set yourself apart in the fashion job market right now.
Yeah, I think for anyone that's interested in starting a business or researching, I think now is the time to do it. I've actually heard other people say, no, the economy is all over the place, don't do it. But that's when you tap in. When everything is going down, when you have these large companies, like Macy's suffering, like now is your opening. Get in there, start, do your research. And I think the great thing about what's sort of happening is that there's so many voices in the fashion space and everybody's talking about it. Like I remember when I first got into the industry, there was like Women's Wear Daily. And if you didn't have money to buy a prescription, like you rarely knew what was happening in the industry. Now everything is out there. So now you can sort of research what companies did right, what companies did wrong, and incorporate that into building your own company. So I say now is the time to tap in.
Excellent. One of the questions that we have deals with a lot of the inventory issues that you described. Do you have a sense of what kind of inventory levels manufacturers actually have right now with factory closings? Are products still moving?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number, but I'll say it's pretty scary how much is just sitting in warehouses right now. I mean, these are like millions, billions of dollars. Like I said, my partner just has products sitting there because what happened is when COVID first hit, the only things that they were allowing to ship in were masks, ventilators and things like that. So everything had to stop. So I think right now the Chinese market is sort of playing catch up in terms of what is getting ready to be shipped. And there's probably a little bit of bribery, I'm sure Target has more pool than he does, so I think it's just a matter of time. And then the thing is a lot of these companies created goods for spring of 2020. So by the time it comes over here, it's probably not going to be in trend anymore. So now they also need to figure out a way. Do we dead stock this fabric? Do we revamp it? Do we bring it to like off price markets? So a lot of them will pull off their labels and then resell it to third party markets or off price markets so they can still try to get some profit out of it. So you'll start to see that a lot. Or actually, if you go on a lot of like websites like Shopbop and Neiman Marcus, like a lot of things are on sale. Not that many people are buying things at full price right now.
Sure.
So it's still a trickle down effect. And I think it's gonna be around for at least another year that you're gonna see
Hmm.
this coming in.
Do you think to piggyback on that, do you foresee that maybe the fashion industry will start to get out of its usual seasonality and be more of a year-round system of production?
Absolutely. I can't think of the name of the designer, maybe Raf Simmons or something, but he came out with an op-ed and basically said, forget all the rules. There's no rules in fashion anymore. He's like, I'm going to put out what I want to put out when I want to put it out, and that's it. And I love that approach. I think the industry was moving so fast that you would create a collection for spring and then literally have a week of downtime, and then you have to start creating the next collection for fall. There was just no time to think. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no rules anymore.
That's interesting. We have a question from one of our attendees asking, do you see an increase in demand for professional remote work attire, somewhere that bridges sort of between yoga pants and Gucci? And is it all just tops?
You know what? Yes, because if you knew what I was wearing at the bottom, then completely answer your question. But I love that. And there's actually Gucci just came out with a partnership with North Face. I was a little iffy about it because I didn't really understand the messaging, but I think it sort of speaks to the idea of high end and adventure, or high end and low end. Like, how can we sort of like bridge the gaps between all these different all these different industries within fashion?
Hmm, for sure. And I know that this next question is something that we've discussed a little bit. But how do you see fast fashion companies lasting into the future with their sort of cheap and trending clothes?
Fast fashion. Here's the thing: fast fashion will always be around because there's a bit of socioeconomics that comes into play. Not everyone can afford Prada or even Anthropology. And so there are going to be people that still can only afford the $5 shirt. I just think what the companies like H&M's and M's and the Forever 21 companies need to do is find ways to bring social impact or environmental impact into what they do. So whether it's working with their garment workers and making sure that they're being paid, because the thing is, when you go into a store and you're paying $5 for a shirt, you have to realize that the journey of that garment for it to be $5 was a nasty journey. Like, how much is that garment worker really making if I'm only paying $5 for it? So I think it also starts with the consumer. The only way fast fashion companies are going to go away is because it starts with us. We're the ones that are still going in there every day and giving them our money, and we're not questioning them. We're not challenging them. I do know H&M came out with a conscious campaign, which is great in theory, but when you sort of look under the hood, you realize it's a form of greenwashing. And what greenwashing is, it's just using the term sustainability, eco-friendly for marketing purposes. So they put that out and then they got called out again. I mean, they just keep doing wrong. Like, I really believe that one day they'll get it right. But it starts with the consumer.
For sure. We have some questions about big brands in different ways. One is, how do the big brand, how do the Walmarts, the Targets of the world start to make change? And then also, how do smaller brands, designers, artisans find opportunities to partner with some of these big brands?
Yeah. So for these large corporate companies like Target and Walmart, there was this whole campaign that came out called Pull Up for Change. And it was challenging these companies. We want to know what you all are doing behind the scenes. Are a portion of your proceeds, are they going to help, people in need? Are you paying your garment workers? Again, are you giving shelf space to BIPOC, minority, or designers? Like, what are you doing to offset some of the bad things that you're doing? Because look, a lot of these companies are so far down the rabbit hole, it's really gonna take years for them to get out of it. But in the meantime, they can pull up, they can make change. So it will take time, but we have to continue to challenge them. But I suggest everyone, they have a whole campaign on Instagram, so you can see all of the companies that are sort of being called out, and then you can see what their response is to how they're going to fix it.
It's great. Another question really deals with some of the new technology, some of the smart fabrics, Project Hazel, the Snapchat glasses, really thinking about, how much does this technology add weight to the product? So where do you see, or where is the industry going with sort of lighter functional materials, and where do those opportunities present themselves?
Yeah, I think we're really in a space of comfort over like fabulosity. No, and I won't say over fabulosity. I would say comfort and fabulosity. I think it's like honestly, like we're such an over consuming society. If you look in your closet right now, what do you really need? You don't really need anything more. Like if you buy something right now, it's because you want it. So I think that's why the technology companies are going to win because I would love to have a jacket that talks to me. Like, I don't have one of those in my closet. Like, I would love some glasses that can video all the stuff that's happening. Like, I definitely don't own a pair of those. So I think that's the new wave. We all have a blue jeans, we all have a white t-shirt, but we don't have masks that have UV sensory and rechargeable ventilators. Like, I want one of those.
I think to wrap up the conversation, I think and to tie it back to Jefferson and the programs that fall under your purview now, um, how do you see, or what do you think are really the imperatives to educating fashion professionals moving forward?
I think what I love about what we're doing in our program, because COVID really did affect the way that we teach, and we were having to find ways to teach pattern making over Zoom, which is just completely unheard of, but we did it. But I've after speaking to my professors, because we're sort of giving everyone space to be more creative and sort of like taking a moment to breathe, like last semester and beginning of this semester, our students have put out some of their best work, believe it or not, because we all are just giving ourselves, a moment to like be purposeful about what we want to do and what we design. And conversations we've had this week, it's about innovation, it's about technology, sustainability, fashion for all. How can we, bring all of that into play? So I think it's just taking a step back and allowing we're in a creative space for a reason. So let's give ourselves space to create.
Perfect. And on that note, I want to thank you again, Farai, and for everyone who joined us. We had a few questions from folks who wanted to know if we would be sharing the slides, but we've been recording tonight's program, and tomorrow you'll receive an email in your inbox with a link to view the recording by the end of the day tomorrow. So everyone will be able to go back and refer to all the great information that was shared this evening. We want to also invite all of our alumni and guests with us to remain connected to your fellow Jefferson, Textile, and Philadelphia University alumni by registering your profile on our brand new alumni network. You can sign up today at alumninetwork.jefferson.edu. And if you update your profile by Valentine's Day, you'll enter our weekly prize drawing. We also have a number of interesting and exciting alumni events coming up in the virtual space, beginning next week with the power of the PPE pivot. This is an alumni panel discussion from a variety of alumni who have pivoted their businesses from design and manufacturing and textiles to create PPE to really identify the opportunity in the market. On February 9th, we'll have our first ever wine and design night. And if you sign up by this Sunday, we will send you all of your materials from the canvas to the paints, and you just bring the wine. Then later in the month, we will have an alumni update from our provost, Dr. Mark Tukachinsky, on February 18th at 7 p.m. You can find these and all of our upcoming events at jefferson.edu/alumni events. Thank you all once again for joining us. We hope that you all stay safe and have a great evening.